Hi guys, thanks for tuning into another episode of Nuggets News. Today, Kyle and I are going to talk about everything that's been happening, about why this is appearing to be maybe the super cycle. All the stars are really aligning. We're going to go through a lot of those clues, and then we're going to talk about the charts and I guess the key levels. But how have you been, mate?
Yeah, really good. Good to be back on the pod.
You've been pretty busy, and we might touch on that course and everything you've been doing as well at the end. But I just might share my screen quickly so you can see everything that we're going to talk about. But yeah, Bitcoin's now had a absolutely monster month, and I think last time we spoke it was kind of this key level here about 50,000 that we're talking about might be a bit of resistance, and it's
Mm.
blasted through that, which is really good, and now tagged that next fib level. So we might talk about a few of those levels at the end, but I guess let's just talk about what are these drivers and why it's caught a lot of people off guard. The Bitcoin DeFi narrative, I still think that that's something that people don't have their heads around, just the potential size of that, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well. But let's just have a look at a few of these interesting, I guess, tweets and things we've seen recently. So stock to flow, Plan B was copying it a lot down here, saying this is no longer valid, but we've very quickly got back up, and even today, 57. We're back above the mean of the stock to flow model, which can put us to over 100,000 in the next few months. So it's crazy how quickly things can catch up. But if we look at these other currencies, I think this is what's really interesting. So Aussie dollar, Bitcoin price hitting 88,000, now just a few percent below its all-time highs. And I think you saw this tweet from Balaji as well, and this was from last week saying, 14 countries, new all-time highs, again, a week ago. So a couple of dozen now, and we've seen, everyone has the slight different price on which exchange, but huge countries like China, and I think you mentioned when we're talking Japan. So it's just
hmm
kind of the US really that's left in a few of these other countries. But if we look in the US, we're talking about this as the consumer price index, and because inflation has been so high, so when Bitcoin peaked back in November 2021, the equivalent CPI then $36 now buys you say $32. So more than a 10% fall in purchasing power since Bitcoin peaked. And what that does is basically put the equivalent Bitcoin price 10% higher. As I think someone had that maybe in their comments here down below, but so that puts the equivalent Bitcoin price at say something like low 70,000. So just I want people to remember that, yeah, all these other countries are making new all-time highs, but don't forget that the equivalent price, because of how much money's being printed even in US dollars, puts that at a lot higher. The Bitcoin inflation rate, a lot of people are excited about the halving and how the inflation rate's going to drop of Bitcoin from about 1.7 down to 0.8. I guess the ETF flows, though we had a monster day yesterday.
Really big.
You've really been across that, so we'll talk about that in a second as well. But a few of these other interesting metrics in our alpha research chat group with the team, someone, I think it was William, just shared this. Fidelity's just put out a report recommending 1 to 3% in crypto, and not even just specifically Bitcoin crypto. This is kind of the dream. This is what we've been waiting for all these years.
hmm
A far cry from Bitcoin being called a scam and whatnot. And just some of these other metrics about how retail aren't really here. 600 comments a day on the crypto Reddit threads compared to the peak 30,000 comments a day. So what's that? 50x to get back there. So that's really awesome to see. I think we've had good signups and good views on our content, but it's not going parabolic like it does in a real bull market once you get into that cycle. So again, that's something else that leads us to think we're not really well and truly into that cycle. And I guess with everyone being excited about that Bitcoin halving and that inflation rate, the amount of new Bitcoin dropping from 1.6 to 0.8, as we just spoke about, this is how much ETH has been burned lately. So it's actually the total amount of ETH is decreasing 0.5%. So it's far more scarce. And even when Bitcoin drops to zero point 0.8, relatively Ethereum is becoming far more scarce. And we know as we get in the bull market, ETH fees go up. So this might drop to -1%, -2%, huge amounts of ETH being burned. So I'll stop sharing my screen. But I guess, what are your thoughts? And if there's anything that you want to share on your screen, maybe we just start with the currencies thing globally and all these countries that are already breaking out into all-time highs, which we haven't done in past cycles before the halving.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, I think Japan was probably the one that surprised me the most because, I mean, you compare it like Argentina, obviously, like Nigeria and countries like that, are really, we all know that they're having hyperinflation at the moment. But Japan, is one of the G7 countries, one of the top GDP nations on the planet. Like, and then to see that that's already far above all time high, that was actually a bit of a wow factor for me.
Yeah, Japan, one of the basket currencies, one of the most used currencies in the world. So as you say, we maybe, if a country like Argentina has a huge amount of inflation, 70 to 90%, that kind of offsets the Bitcoin declining 70 to 90%, and that's the only thing that can sort of see a Bitcoin make a new all-time high in a currency from one cycle to the other. So that this time around, the fact that it's just general strength and all currencies bleeding out, particularly
Mm.
against the US dollar, but the US dollar is also printed so much. And I'm sure you've seen those metrics about 5 trillion still on the sidelines in US stock market accounts, or
Hmm.
US household wealth that's disproportionately in the hands of the upper class, obviously, 18 trillion in assets or whatever they've grown to post COVID. There's still a lot of money to move, and maybe take up Fidelity on that position. And I think you've spoken a bit about that competition for ETF managers and why they want them into products.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we were talking the other day, and gave the example of they've probably all got their best Jordan Belfort type reps on the phone, calling all of their customers and all their high net worth individuals, and they're trying to compete to stay alive in the ETF race because the bottom few are going to eventually fall off. So they all want to have the most volume as quickly as possible, so they get that staying power. And the more volume and flows you have, the more likely you're going to attract more. It's like
Yeah.
everybody's just putting their money into BlackRock and Fidelity and ARK at the moment. So, they'll all be doing everything they can to try and get as many people into it. So I'm just imagining all these conversations of the sales reps calling up their customers and telling them, there's this thing in the crypto world that it's called the halving, and Bitcoin's going to, become more scarce, and it's happening in April. And we're literally, the crypto world has never had something like that. A team of sales reps going out and educating people about what this industry is about, what the halving is, what about scarce and solid sound money is. So,
Yeah.
and I think we're seeing those flows come in right now, and it's the flows that we're seeing are amazing. Everyone, like just last night, we had $500 million of capital flow into the ETFs. It's like, you
Yeah.
know, it's crazy. If you compare that to how much money is going to be, how much Bitcoin is going to be getting produced by the miners, it's so far above. So we're about to have a supply shock and a demand shock at the same time. And I don't think people are ready for how high things potentially could end up going based on that.
Yeah. And were you aware of that same supply shock with ETH? If ETH's growing anywhere from its current negative levels and shrinking, let's say ETH gets an ETF as well, same thing, supply shock, demand shock at the same time.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I mean, you were saying the other day about Ethereum is actually in a negative compared to its inflation versus Bitcoin. Do you want to talk about that quickly?
Yeah. I'll bring that back up on the screen. I just showed it quickly, but basically, since we moved to proof of stake and the fees from ETH get burnt, there's just so much ETH being used in gas fees and being burnt. It outsupplies the new amount of ETH that we have to pay out to stakers to make that financially viable. So yeah, that's now in the negatives, and the total amount of ETH is shrinking. Let's say we get that ETF and we're getting hundreds of millions inflow into that, then it's the same thing that's happening to Bitcoin right now, and we can just see these gigantic moves. Anything from you thoughts wise on sort of Bitcoin DeFi stuff? And I think you've had to play around a little bit with a few of the wallets, or is that all still fairly new? Or
I've only been trading them, to be honest.
okay,
I need to get involved. And you were talking about Leather Wallet the other day. I need to set that up and start getting involved. Because, to be honest, last cycle, it took me way too long to start getting involved with the
yes.
Ethereum DeFi stuff. So I got to be on top of it, getting early, the
Hmm.
Bitcoin DeFi stuff this time.
Yeah, so for people at home, hopefully by now you've familiarized yourself with MetaMask, the little extension that you can just add to your browser. And the same thing now, Leather is probably one of the best all rounder wallets. Make sure you go to the official sites. or if you want to get involved in the Stacks ecosystem, Sovereign, Botanics is one that's coming up with its launch. Alex Labs, all these fantastic projects we've been covering in our research and in our portfolios. It really is as simple. If you've got your head around MetaMask, it's just the same thing, guys. You add these Bitcoin wallet extensions, and then you've just got to connect in your browser and to the website and have a play around. So it's, I know people think it's crazy hard and it's all difficult, but it's these days, as long as you take 5 minutes to learn, connecting to a layer 2 to Optimism and Arbitrum and Polygon, it's as simple as just that drop down menu and changing what chain you're on in MetaMask. And I think for the Bitcoin DeFi space, we're about to see all that. It's being built out. The aggregators, so being able to go from Lightning to Botanics to Stacks or whatever, that's all going to be so simple. I've continued to have these amazing conversations with these devs that are so excited, and some of them are leaving Ethereum to build what they've already built inside the Ethereum ecosystem in the Bitcoin world now. So stable coins are coming. All these projects are coming to the Bitcoin world, because the total market cap of Bitcoin is over $1 trillion compared to when Ethereum DeFi started at maybe 100 million, a couple 100 million, whatever. It's just that 10x potential plus the growth of the bull market cycle and everything. It's just the growth that's coming in that space. Within a year or two, we saw all the top ETH layer 2s get to $1 billion and now 10 billion market cap. So I think the top Bitcoin, the top half a dozen Bitcoin layer 2s and Bitcoin projects are going to occupy the top 50 on CoinMarketCap pretty quickly, with market caps between $1 billion and 10 billion. So if it's your play as a trader at home, like Kyle, to trade that sort of stuff, or if you're a long-term investor and you want to get in and actually use them or whatever, however suits you best, but it's pretty awesome to see all this happening.
Pretty cool. Did you just say stable coins on Bitcoin Network?
Yeah, so with these interviews we've been doing, some people might not be aware, there's already a stablecoin called Dollar issued by Sovereign. So it's backed by Bitcoin and over collateralized. There's another one called Money on Chain, and they have a dollar on chain on Bitcoin.
Okay.
And then there's a few of these other layer 2s like Stacks and Botanics that we're talking to, and I've been chained to the devs that are about to launch their testnet. So these projects are maybe a lot further along than just ideas. And a lot of that's simplified because they've got these Ethereum compatible EVM, the Ethereum virtual machine compatible stuff happening in the Bitcoin layer 2 world. So a lot of the time they'll be able to just copy the code from some of these better projects and protocols in the ETH world or the Solana world or whatever world it is, and bring that a lot easier. So this cycle, again, this is the super cycle stars aligning. This can happen pretty quickly over the next year or two. It's not like it's going to take 3 or 4 years to go from the idea of Uniswap to really building it out to being a great product in the ETH world.
It's almost like ETH was the warm-up.
Yeah, I mean, I should say for people, I'm still super bullish on Ethereum and layer 2s, and I think all that ecosystem continues to grow, but I think the growth potential is now in the Bitcoin DeFi startup space. These projects that are launching, the potential growth for them is obviously a lot bigger as they start compared to what Polygon or Optimism can grow to from now to the top of the cycle. I think that percentage gain is, the opportunity is bigger in the Bitcoin DeFi space.
That's really solid alpha, to be honest.
Anything else you want to share? I'm trying to think of, we recorded this yesterday and then it turns out my audio wasn't working even though you could hear me properly the whole time. I'm trying to think, there's 1 or 2 slides, or maybe if you want to just go to your charts and share a few of those sort of key levels that are the next resistances after this monster run we've had.
Yeah, sure thing. 1 second.
Yeah.
So yeah, I actually thought we are probably going to stall out around this value area high, which is this grey box here, and that just represents an average area of all the trading that happened pretty much in the whole of 2021, right? And so we call that the value area high of 2021. And I thought we would stall out there because it actually came up and gave it a really perfect test, which you can see here. But then we just blew through it overnight. And It's been really interesting because during the Asia time zones, we've been quite sideways. Not much has been happening. But yesterday, when we opened the week, it just took off. As soon as New York opened, you can see the price just absolutely launched from there. It hasn't looked back. And I think that's because the ETF flows, which we were just looking at before, have just been so big. Like, Monday night was $500 million of inflows into the crypto sphere or into Bitcoin, I should say. And probably the most notable thing at the moment is that the GBTC outflows have really started to dry up. And then also, probably a really important thing to take note of as well is Coinbase had an absolutely massive pump. So did MicroStrategy. MicroStrategy had a 16% move and then a 10% move on the Tuesday night. And miners had a really big move as well. Right is a little bit underperforming, but CLSK, that pumped almost 30%, 40% in 2 days, had a bit of a pullback overnight though, but still up about 26, 27%. So, we were sort of discussing, we kind of feel like, what happened on Monday, because obviously there was a big shift. Like Fidelity had a huge inflow, one of the biggest inflows they've had, and then all the miners went nuts as well. Bitcoin didn't really have that big of a move, I don't believe, for it to be justified in the size of the move that we saw across the ecosystem. So it's just something to think about, that potentially somebody with a lot of money at one of the hedge funds gave the nod to a few different people that, hey, this thing's really going to take off soon. So make sure you get positioned across the entire ecosystem. And people bought up Coinbase, MicroStrategy, and all the miners as well, just to get that market-wide exposure. So
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think, like we were saying the other day, it's a sign that smart money is now seeking out the beta, the things that are going to outperform. So it's almost like once smart money goes right, it's a given now for us that Bitcoin's in its bullish cycle for the next year or two. What other things are going to outperform? So yeah, as you say, we saw a huge move across the Bitcoin miners. Just like when people think that gold or silver is going to move, they might go for what's going to outperform. It's the gold or silver miners. But the other thing is, now we've got the Bitcoin ETF. We might start to get yes, the ETH ETF, and yes, an altcoin ETF or whatever the next coins in line are. But we might get a basket of traditional financial companies, anything that's involved in the crypto space, miners and Coinbase, maybe even, pure crypto startup or funds, or, that kind, all those products. Now that these products are popular and crypto's popular and we're in a bull market, there's so many different ways that traditional money seeks exposure, I guess, and outperformance.
definitely, for sure. So just to go back over these key levels that you wanted me to get up, I think this order block up here is going to be one to watch for sure. And an order block is just a key level of resistance, and it's basically the last up candle before the downtrend started, and that's the order block from the all-time high. So that's probably going to be an area that the bears try to defend and stop price from just running through to a new all-time high. So if you're bearish, this will be a defending point basically. And then we had this gap in here that some people call an imbalance, or the smart money concepts guys call these an FEG. That's basically the bottom of this wick of the top candle. There's a gap here, and then this candle starts here. It doesn't overlap. Whereas if you look, most of the time, most candles have a full overlap. And if there's a gap like this, people will use that for a target. And because this is on the weekly time frame, that's probably a target for a few people. So we might see some selling or resistance around here as well. And then probably the other major level for people to keep their eye on is the monthly all-time high, the close. So that's about 61 and a half. And if we go back and look at the pre-halving rally in 2019, it came up and actually rejected right off the highest monthly close, which is about 14K. So, potentially that's going to be a level that we could see some issues at from more upside. And
Yeah.
as you already talked about, February's just been an absolute monster month. So I wouldn't be surprised if we got a candle that looks something like this in the next month, and comes up here, rejects off here,
So
and have a little bit of a pullback, and then we take off again.
about 10% away from a few levels of resistance, and then, as you said, maybe it doesn't have to be a big decline. I don't think everyone's going to get an easy entry back into 30,000s or even 40,000s or anything like that. But yeah, it's had a good run. The halving's getting pretty close now. And maybe I think ETH similar. If we have a look at ETH and it's monthly, it's kind of getting up towards a few of those weekly and monthly resistance is around 3,500. So maybe, yeah, and then that. Yeah, I'll let you talk about that. But Ethereum and the ETH Bitcoin ratio can be telling us a few things about when alts might run.
Yeah, definitely. So I think Ethereum still has more upside. This obviously is a major swing point at 35 or 3,500. So that's going to be interesting to see how ETH reacts to that. I'd be surprised if it tagged this and then just ran all the way to 4,800. Um, potentially 4,100 is a key level to keep our eye on as well. But I think this is a really obvious level that it's going to have some issues at. So I could see something like this, and then we put in some sort of a flag pattern or something similar to this type of structure, and then it takes its time. I'd love to see something like a falling wedge, something like this, and then take off, because those obviously are the easiest sort of setups to get into. Something similar to this one back here, right?
Yeah.
And then the ETH BTC chart has been really interesting because we've been in this falling wedge since August 22, and it's trying to get back above this key trend line from back here. If you connect those levels, it's trying to get back above that level. But I think probably the most important thing to take note of here, this order block here, which is going to act as resistance. And we can see its price is already rejected off that multiple times through here, 1, 2, 3, and now the fourth time. Once that flips, it definitely opens up a bigger move to potentially 0.72 or all the way back up to the previous highs around 0.86. But really interesting price action here on the weekly time frame, because you can notice I always teach all my students to go back to the bare basics all the time and think about what is the high time frame trend doing. You can see all through here we're making lower highs consistently, right, and always lower lows, right. And at this point here, we've actually had a bit of a shift, and we're putting in a lower, the ultimate low here of the trend, and then this higher low has been put in, and now we actually put in a high and then a higher high. So that's almost, you could say that this is a sideways range. So you can't really confirm it just yet if it's getting ready to break out and change its trend. But I think a really important thing to watch for here is if we come down and the ETH bulls defend this low just here, which pretty much closes around 0.52, if they can hold that as another higher high, that can be a really key message to the marketplace that ETH is getting ready to push and finally break through this order block. So it's like the little things when you're reading a chart. You focus on the basics. It's okay, we're getting rejected from this level, but if we make a new higher low here, then that can give us a higher percentage probability that we're actually going to break through this order block here. And then if we do, then you can expect something like that from there.
Yeah.
That's when that big move can sort of come. And probably the other theory that I had as well on Ethereum, if it can't break out above this order block, is a potential rollover again down to maybe this level through here, or the higher time frame support and resistance level through here at about 0.3 up to about 0.4, which would probably be an amazing entry. So I'm kind of hoping that ETH BTC rolls over and ETH trails for a little bit while Bitcoin just goes absolutely nuts for a while. And you see Ethereum bleed out something similar to these structures here. And then, there's that reflex action where ETH finally makes its move versus US dollar, and then it just takes off while Bitcoin takes a break and goes sideways. Because in the last cycle, like, those were some of the best trades that I made. I actually doubled my account off this trade here in terms of my Bitcoin holding, and then moved back to Bitcoin when Ethereum sort of stalled out, and then Bitcoin took off again. And that was one of the biggest builders from my one trade from the entire last cycle. So I'm hoping to try and replicate that again. We'll see if we get that same trade, but I would love to see that come back down to this red box here around 0.375.
So
we'll
for that
see.
scenario to happen, we'd have to have something like Bitcoin push another, say, 20+%, while Ethereum kind of hovers around where it is, which would mean Bitcoin like going to new all-time highs, or even beyond. So just really going parabolic into a super cycle, and ETH just lagging while Bitcoin's in its monster, I guess, uptrend.
So what I always look for is once we break to a new all-time high, I look for these Fibonacci levels. I call them macro fib levels, and I can draw them over the last market cycle, and you can see how accurate they were in the last market cycle. But price really, really respects them, especially on the low time frames. So you can see here we after we broke to a new all-time high, price ran basically to 2.272, then came all the way back to the 1.618 in basically one move, right? From once it broke through, 11K, ran all the way to 2.272, and then pulled back, flipped to 618, and then ran all the way up to 3.272. So, like, if we go and look at a comparative run of what that would be, that would basically be a run from here all the way up to 100, pretty much 40K. So, even if we ran all the way to the 1.618, it's probably a little bit more realistic if it does get a crazy FOMO pump from the institutions, right, over the next 6 months. That could basically be the result. We run to 100K, and then it has a bit of a pullback to, maybe 83, and then that's when Ethereum takes off and plays catch up. So, just a theory. Doesn't mean, I'm not saying it has to happen, but that would be what would be required for this sort of rollover for Ethereum here. So, I know a lot of people, when the market starts taking off and breaking to new all-time highs, they get a little bit upset if they're not really well positioned. So that's just something to potentially think about, a trade that you might be able to make. If you're not super positioned in Bitcoin, you might be able to catch the ETH catch-up play. So, yeah, something to watch anyway, guys.
Fantastic. Well, I might exit that if you want to stop sharing your screen. And I guess final thoughts. It's pretty exciting to see what the price action without the crazy inflow of retail.
Yeah.
You've been very busy the last few months doing your trading courses and all that. How did that go?
Yeah, really good. So we took a couple hundred students through our Market Mastery 3 program, which is, our most advanced course that we've put together to date. And I'm really proud of everything that the team developed. And, we developed our own set of indicators to make everybody's life easy, to, give people alerts when you have high volume popping up in the different coins, which is usually when you have like a nice reversal. So that's saving a whole heap of our students time, because you don't have to be looking at the screen all day, every day. You can set up your alerts, and there's a potential reversal setting up. You look at your phone, and you come back, and you can execute a trade. Basically we ran that over the last 3 months, and we finished it up last Tuesday. So it's been really good. I'm really proud of the team on what we achieved, and getting amazing feedback from students. So yeah, it's been great.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate all the stuff you're doing in our community as well, guys. So Kyle's active in our premium group with TA updates, and I'll link to his socials down below, where he's doing plenty of great stuff for free on Twitter and his YouTube, and the link to all his courses if you want the premium stuff he does as well. But any final thoughts, Kyle?
Mate, I'm just really excited for what's going to happen over the next couple of months. I mean, you never know 100%, but I just feel like the potential for this cycle to be, what we were saying before, the actual super cycle. And I just feel like people are, ever since this cycle started, people have been minimizing it and saying, oh, it's going to be the one that fails and all. And that happens every cycle, right?
Yeah.
And the same thing last cycle. And I just kind of feel like people are underestimating the potential, especially with the Bitcoin DeFi stuff coming out and the demand coming from institutions right now, and the lack of interest we're really seeing across the board from retail, like what we looked at with the Reddit numbers of comments, like down massively. And if you go and look at, what is Bitcoin searches and what is cryptocurrency searches on Google, like they're way down from where we were when, the market was getting frothy in the last cycle. So
yeah, well,
I think it's still early.
It's called disbelief, isn't it, on the Wall Street cheat sheet? And 2 weeks ago, there was still plenty of people saying, this is just the bounce, and we're going to 12K still, and that's the whole past year I've been saying that's really healthy. That's what you want. You need those ingredients for those people that were even in crypto or big trading accounts that have missed all this run or been on the wrong side of the market. They're the fuel for the fire to really drive the cycle higher. So
I think Checkmate put up a post just yesterday in showing the numbers of how offside everybody is, because generally when you're getting to quite frothy areas, everybody's very heavily long. and he put up, and basically the long to short ratio was right down the bottom. So everybody's shorting right now. So it's like, okay,
Yeah.
everything matches up,
Yeah. No, awesome to see. All right, guys, links down below to follow Kyle and all our work, as always, in the description. But hope you guys have enjoyed that video. Hit like, share it around, and we'll talk to you again soon. Cheers.
See you guys.